The Hells Angels biker watched the little girl uncover a box buried under his childhood floorboards, and the truth inside burned his soul. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain was pouring down that night, but it didn't bother Jake Morrison. A man of the road, he was used to the harsh elements and the constant pull of the highway. His motorcycle roared as it cut through the wet streets, the familiar hum of the engine a constant reminder of his years spent as a Hells Angels enforcer. But tonight, something felt different. As he approached the small, dilapidated house he had once called home, a feeling of unease settled in his chest. He had returned to the house after many years, hoping to find some peace, to shake off the ghosts of his past. But little did he know, his return would uncover something far darker. He pulled into the driveway, the headlights illuminating the overgrown yard. The house stood eerily silent, its broken windows and sagging roof a testament to years of neglect. He had no real plans for the house, just a place to lay low for a while, to escape the chaos that followed him wherever he went. The door creaked as he pushed it open, stepping inside. The smell of mildew hit him instantly, mingling with the musty scent of old wood and forgotten memories. The living room, once full of life, now stood empty, save for the dust that covered the furniture and the cobwebs that hung from the ceiling. Jake stood there for a moment, taking in the familiar surroundings, but his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of something shifting upstairs. He froze. Had someone broken in? Was there someone else here? With his hand instinctively reaching for the switchblade tucked into his jacket, Jake quietly made his way up the stairs. The old wooden steps groaned under his weight, and he winced at the sound. As he reached the top, he heard it. Again, a faint scratching sound, like something being moved. Following the noise, he entered the bedroom that had once belonged to him. The room was just as he remembered, the cracked walls, the faded wallpaper, and the old bed that looked like it might collapse at any moment. But it was the floorboards that caught his attention. One of them had been lifted, revealing a small, wooden box buried beneath. Jake's heart skipped a beat as he moved closer. The sight of the box stirred something deep inside him, something he thought he had buried long ago. What could this be? A letter? A photograph? What secret had his younger self left behind? The answer came when a small figure appeared at the doorway. A young girl, no older than 10, with wide, curious eyes. She stood frozen, staring at the box in disbelief. Jake's mind raced. How could this little girl be here, in his old house, uncovering this hidden piece of his past? What was she doing here? And why was this box in the place he had left it, untouched for so many years? The girl took a hesitant step forward, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the box. She didn't seem afraid of Jake, not like most people would be when faced with a Hells Angels biker. Instead, she seemed to feel the same pull toward the box, the same need to understand what it held. Jake watched in silence, his breath catching as she slowly lifted the lid. What they found inside would change everything for both of them. The truth that had been buried for so long was about to come to light, and neither of them was ready for what it would reveal. I could feel the weight of the room shift as the little girl gently lifted the wooden box, her small hands trembling just slightly. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, was something that could change everything. I stood there in silence, my eyes fixed on the box she had uncovered, my heart pounding in my chest. I had spent years running from the past, trying to bury it in the dirt beneath this old house. But the past had a way of clawing its way back to the surface, no matter how deep you buried it. She looked up at me, her brown eyes wide with confusion and curiosity, the faintest hint of fear lingering in them. I could see that she didn't fully understand what she had uncovered, but the weight of what was about to happen hung thick in the air. Slowly, she unwrapped the cloth, revealing a stack of old papers. I could see the edges of a photograph peeking out from under the pile, and I knew immediately what it was. The moment she held it up, the world seemed to stop. The photo was worn, its edges curled, but the image was unmistakable. It was me, a much younger version of myself, standing next to a man I had once called family, my Hells Angels patch proudly displayed on my chest. My past had never seemed so real, so close, until now. I took a slow step toward her, my breath catching in my throat. The young girl looked up at me, the photograph still in her hands. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice small, unsure of what she was asking. I didn't know how to respond. How could I explain the man in the photo? The man who had once been my mentor, my brother, only to betray me in the most unimaginable way? The man who had led me down a path I could never escape? I reached out and took the photograph from her, the memories flooding back in waves. I could almost hear the roar of the engines, the clinking of the beer bottles, the loud laughter and shouts that echoed in the clubhouses, the sense of belonging that I had craved all my life. But those days were long gone, erased by the violence, the betrayal, and the bloodshed that had come with it. As I stared at the photo, my mind raced. I had thought I had left all of that behind, thought I could start over in this old house, in this quiet little town. But the truth was, there was no escaping the past. I could feel the weight of the secrets that had been buried here for so long, just waiting for someone to uncover them. "Who was he?" the girl asked again, her voice a little louder this time, sensing my hesitation. I looked at her, not knowing how to explain the connection between the two of us. She was just a kid, a curious kid who had stumbled onto something she shouldn't have, and now she was looking to me for answers. Answers I wasn't ready to give. I handed the photograph back to her, my fingers brushing against hers. "He was someone from my past," I said quietly. "Someone I used to trust." The words tasted bitter in my mouth, like poison I had swallowed and tried to forget. But the truth was, there was no forgetting. There was only living with the scars, both physical and emotional. The little girl tilted her head, clearly unsatisfied with the answer, but she didn't press me further. She simply nodded and turned her attention back to the box. I could feel the heat of the moment fading, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. What else was in that box? What other memories, secrets, or truths had been hidden away in this house all these years? I had no answers. Not yet. But as I watched the little girl continue to sift through the contents, I knew one thing for sure. The past was coming for me, whether I was ready for it or not. The sound of the rain outside picked up, drumming against the windows as if it too was urging me to face what I had left behind. My mind was reeling, but I knew I had to stay calm. I couldn't let the past swallow me whole. Not again. But as the girl pulled out another object from the box, a small, silver key, I knew that the door to my past was slowly creaking open. And this time, there would be no turning back. I stood there, staring at the silver key the little girl had pulled from the box, my heart pounding in my chest. The key was small, unassuming, but it felt heavy in my hand. It wasn't just a key. It was a symbol of everything I had tried to escape. The weight of the past, the blood I'd shed, the people I'd lost. It all came rushing back in that one moment. The girl looked up at me, still clutching the key in her small hands, her eyes filled with curiosity and confusion. She didn't understand what it meant. She didn't understand the storm that was about to hit. I wanted to say something, anything, to make her feel safe, to make her understand that this wasn't just some game. But the words stuck in my throat. All I could manage was a low grunt. "Where does this go?" she asked, holding the key up to me, her voice a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "That key opens a door," I said, my voice sounding far away, like it wasn't even mine. "A door I've tried to forget about for years." The girl stared at me, waiting for me to elaborate, but I wasn't ready to go there. Not yet. Instead, I turned and walked over to the corner of the room, my boots scraping against the dusty floorboards. The house was silent except for the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. It felt like the storm outside was mirroring the one brewing inside me. I needed to focus. I needed to find that door. I had spent so many years running from it, hiding from the past, from the man I used to be. But now it was here, staring me in the face, and I couldn't run anymore. I reached into the back of the closet, pulling aside a stack of old blankets and boxes, revealing a small wooden door at the far end of the room. It was barely noticeable, tucked away behind layers of dust and forgotten memories. The door had always been there, but I had never dared to open it. Until now. I felt the key in my pocket, the cold metal pressing against my skin. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. The girl stepped closer, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "Is that where it goes?" she asked. I nodded, my hand shaking slightly as I pulled the key from my pocket. My fingers fumbled with it for a moment, but I forced myself to steady my hand. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The sound of the bolt sliding open echoed in the quiet room, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Slowly, I pushed the door open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air inside was musty, and the smell of old wood and stale memories hit me like a punch in the gut. I stepped inside, the floor creaking under my weight. The girl followed me, her footsteps light and hesitant. The room was small, cramped with old furniture and boxes piled high, as if time had forgotten it. But there was something about it, something unsettling. In the corner, I spotted an old, rusted metal chest. It was the kind of chest that belonged in a pirate story, something you would expect to find buried in the sand. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I had seen this chest before, but I had pushed it from my mind. I knelt down and tried to open it, but it was locked. Of course, it was locked. It had always been locked. The key in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I slowly inserted it into the lock. I turned the key, and the chest creaked open, revealing its contents. Inside, there were more photographs, letters, and documents, each one carrying a piece of the past I had spent so many years trying to bury. I pulled out a letter first, the paper yellowed with age. It was written in a familiar handwriting, a handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My father's handwriting. My breath caught in my throat as I began to read. The letter was short, but it carried a weight that almost crushed me. It was from my father, written just before he disappeared. He spoke of regret, of mistakes he had made, and of things left unsaid. But what struck me the most was the last line. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I stood there for a long time, the letter shaking in my hands. The words blurred as tears threatened to fall, but I held them back. I had to keep my composure. I had to stay strong. I glanced over at the girl, who was watching me with wide, innocent eyes. She didn't understand what was happening, but she sensed the gravity of the moment. She sensed the truth was finally coming to light. I put the letter down and pulled out a photograph. This one was even older, faded and worn, but the faces in the photo were unmistakable. It was a picture of me, my father, and a woman I didn't recognize. She had dark hair and a gentle smile, but there was something in her eyes that haunted me. I didn't know who she was, but I knew I needed to find out. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in around me. I had opened the door to my past, and there was no going back. The truth had been buried for so long, but now it was here, staring me in the face. I could feel the weight of it, the burden of the secrets that had been kept from me all these years. The girl stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Who is she? I looked at the photo again, my mind racing. The woman in the photo, she was the key to everything. The answers I had been searching for were right here, hidden in the past. And now, I had to uncover them. I took a long breath and stared at the photograph in my hand. The woman in the picture seemed to look back at me, her dark eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't quite place. Who was she? Why was she in my father's life? These were questions I had never asked before, questions I had pushed down for years, choosing instead to bury the past and forget about the things that had once been so important to me. But now, the past had come crashing into the present, and I had no choice but to face it. The girl stood beside me, her small fingers still holding the key, her gaze now fixed on the photograph I was holding. I could tell she didn't understand what it meant, but something told me she knew it was important. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of confusion that had settled in my mind. I don't know who she is, I finally said, my voice rough. But I think she's part of the reason I ended up here. In this house. In this life. The girl didn't speak. She simply watched me, her brow furrowed in thought. I could feel the weight of her stare, as though she was waiting for me to say something more, to tell her everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. There were too many pieces of the puzzle that I didn't have, too many gaps in the story I needed to fill. I looked down at the photograph again, my fingers tracing the edges of the faded image. My father had kept it hidden all these years, tucked away in a box under the floorboards of this house. Why? What was he trying to protect me from? What was he trying to protect himself from? The sound of the wind outside interrupted my thoughts, the storm still raging as the rain beat against the windows. It felt like the world outside was as restless as I was, as if the very earth itself was urging me to uncover the truth to dig deeper and find the answers I had been avoiding for so long. I turned away from the photograph and began sifting through the other items in the box. There were more letters, more photographs, and some small trinkets that seemed insignificant at first glance. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. A small, worn-out journal. The leather cover was cracked and faded, but there was no mistaking its significance. It was my father's handwriting on the first page. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it and began reading the first few lines. It wasn't much, just a few sentences, but they were enough to make my stomach turn. I did it for her. I did it because I thought she would be better off. I thought she would forgive me. But I was wrong. I'll never be able to take it back. The words echoed in my mind, each one sinking deeper and deeper into my soul. What had he done? What was he trying to tell me? My hands trembled as I turned the pages, reading more and more, until I finally came to the last entry. The words were rushed, as though written in a hurry, and the ink was smudged, as if the writer had been too frantic to care. I know what I've done. I know the damage I've caused. But there's no turning back now. I've made my choice. The journal dropped from my hands, my mind reeling with confusion. My father's words made no sense. What had he chosen? What was he talking about? I needed to know. I needed answers. But the answers were locked away in the past, and I had no idea how to unlock them. The girl, who had been standing quietly beside me, finally spoke. What does it mean? What did he choose? Her voice was small, but there was a quiet urgency in it that made me pause. She wasn't just a bystander in this story. She was a part of it now. And, somehow, she had become a part of me. I turned to look at her, feeling a strange connection to her. She didn't deserve any of this. She was just a kid, caught in a mess she couldn't possibly understand. But somehow, I felt that she was the key to everything. I don't know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I'm going to find out. As I spoke the words, I realized I meant them. I couldn't run anymore. The past had found me, and I had no choice but to face it head on. I wasn't sure where the road would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone. The girl was with me now, and together, we would uncover the truth. The door to the past had been opened, and there was no closing it again. But as I looked at the girl beside me, I felt a strange sense of determination. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. The storm outside continued to rage, but in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. The truth was out there, and we would find it. I stood there, staring at the journal, my mind a storm of confusion and realization. The words my father had written, the guilt, the decisions, the regret, swirled in my head like a vortex, pulling me deeper into a past I had never truly understood. I had always known there was more to my family's story than what I had been told, but this was something else. Something that had been buried for so long that even I, the son of the man who wrote these words, had never known about it. I closed the journal slowly, my hands shaking, my mind racing. What had my father done? And why had he hidden this from me? I couldn't understand it. I had to know more, but where did I even start? The girl stood quietly beside me, still clutching the key, her innocent face reflecting none of the storm that raged inside me. She had no idea what she had uncovered. To her, this was just another part of a strange adventure, another mystery to solve. But to me, it felt like the walls of my entire world were crumbling. She spoke again, her voice small and gentle. Are you okay? I looked down at her, trying to force a smile. But it was no use. I will be, I said, though even I didn't believe it. I have to figure this out. I have to know what happened. She nodded, though I could tell she didn't fully understand. No one ever really understands the weight of the past until it crashes into them like a wave. I looked around the room, feeling a strange pressure building in my chest. The house felt suffocating now, as if it was closing in on me. This place had always been my refuge, my retreat from the world, but now it felt like a cage, holding me captive with the ghosts of memories I hadn't even known I had. The girl's voice broke through my thoughts. Do you think the box has more secrets in it? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I was too lost in my own mind. But she was right. There was more. The box had already revealed so much more than I was ready to face. But I knew there was still more to uncover. I couldn't walk away now, not when the answers were so close. I had to finish this. I stood up, wiping the sweat from my palms. Yeah, I said finally. There's more. I'm going to find it. I looked at the girl, who smiled up at me, her eyes wide with curiosity. It was strange, this feeling of being led by someone so young. She had no idea the depth of what she was involved in, but she had become a part of it, whether she liked it or not. I grabbed the box and set it on the small table in the center of the room. I could feel the weight of it as I opened it again, carefully sifting through the contents. More letters, more photographs. But then, something caught my eye. A small, delicate key, unlike the one the girl had found earlier. This one was older, the metal worn smooth, the edges frayed as if it had been used over and over again. I lifted it carefully, turning it over in my hand. A key to what? There had to be a lock somewhere, a place this key belonged. But where? I looked at the girl, who was now peering over my shoulder, watching me closely. What do you think this goes to? I asked her, though I didn't expect an answer. She studied the key for a moment, then shrugged. Maybe it's for another box, she said simply, as if that was the most obvious thing in the world. I chuckled softly, though the sound felt hollow. Maybe, I said, but it feels different. I think it's for something bigger. I stood up, staring at the room around me. Something in my gut told me the key was important. Important in a way I couldn't quite understand yet. I had to find where it fit. I glanced at the girl. Stay here, I told her, though I wasn't sure why. I wasn't even sure why I felt the need to protect her. She wasn't a child in the traditional sense. She was sharp, intelligent, and had a way of seeing things that most people didn't. But still, something inside me told me to keep her safe, to keep her out of this mess. She nodded and sat down on the couch, content to wait as I moved toward the door. The house felt different now, as if it had shifted in the wake of what we had discovered. The air felt thick, the silence oppressive. I stepped out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to find the lock that matched the key. The past was closing in around me, and there was no turning back now. I walked through the house, my footsteps muffled by the layers of dust that covered the floor. The key felt heavy in my pocket, its presence a constant reminder of the door I had yet to find, the lock that needed unlocking. The storm outside continued to rage, the wind howling through the trees, but it couldn't drown out the growing sense of urgency that gnawed at me. My thoughts were scattered, pulled in different directions as I tried to make sense of everything. The photograph, the journal, the key, the secrets that had been hidden from me for so long. The girl's face, full of innocent curiosity, flashed in my mind. She had no idea what she was caught up in, no idea that the discovery she had made would lead us down a path that neither of us were prepared for. As I walked down the hallway, my mind kept returning to the photograph of my father and the woman I had never met. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a piece of the puzzle was missing, something crucial that would explain everything. Who was she? Why was she in my father's life? Why had he kept her a secret? I paused in front of the old door at the end of the hallway, the one that had always been locked, the one I had never dared open. My fingers brushed against the cold brass doorknob, and for a moment, I hesitated. What if I didn't like what I found? What if the truth was worse than I could ever imagine? But then I thought about the girl. She deserved to know, just like I did. We couldn't live in the dark anymore. I had to face the truth. I had to know what had happened in this house, in my life, that had been hidden from me for so long. With a deep breath, I turned the key in the lock. The door creaked open slowly, the sound echoing through the silent house. The room inside was small, dimly lit by the light filtering through the cracked window. It was almost like stepping into another time, another life. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood, and the room seemed frozen in the past, untouched by the years that had passed. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the familiar yet foreign sight. There was an old desk in the corner, a few shelves lined with books and papers, and a small bed covered with a faded quilt. But it was the chest at the foot of the bed that caught my attention. It was large, heavy, and covered in layers of dust, as though it had been forgotten by time. The lock on the chest was old, worn from years of neglect, but it looked like it would open with the right key. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, delicate key I had found earlier. It fit perfectly. I turned it slowly, the mechanism clicking open with a soft, almost inaudible sound. My heart pounded in my chest as I lifted the lid. Inside, there were more photographs, more letters, more documents that I had never seen before. But there was one thing that stood out. A small, leather-bound book. It was old, the pages yellowed with age, and the cover was cracked and worn. It looked like something that had been treasured, hidden away, and now, finally, it was in my hands. I opened the book, my hands shaking as I turned the first few pages. It was my father's handwriting. The same neat, precise script that I had seen in the journal. But this was different. This was more personal. The first entry was dated years ago, when I was just a child. The words were brief, but they carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. I made a mistake, my father had written. A mistake that can never be undone. I hope you'll understand someday, but I know it's too late for that. I turned the page, my stomach tightening as I read more. The entries were filled with regret, with apologies that came too late, and with a desperation that I hadn't known existed in him. As I read through the pages, I began to understand the man my father had been. Flawed, broken, haunted by decisions he couldn't take back. But there was more. As I reached the final pages, I came across a letter addressed to me. My hands trembled as I read it, the words feeling like a punch to the gut. I failed you, the letter began. I failed your mother. I failed myself. But above all, I failed you. You'll never know how sorry I am, how much I regret the choices I made. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, but I don't deserve your forgiveness. I hope you can make a better life than I ever could. The letter ended with a simple line. I love you, even if I never showed it. I sat down on the floor, the book slipping from my hands as the weight of it all hit me. My father's words, the truth he had hidden from me, were now laid bare in front of me. I had always thought I knew the man he was. But the truth, the real truth, was something entirely different. The room seemed smaller now, the walls closing in around me. The girl stood in the doorway, her face uncertain, but I knew she could feel the shift in the air. She had uncovered this, but it was me who had to face the consequences. The past was no longer something I could run from. It was here, in front of me, and I had to decide what to do with it. I stood up, my legs shaky, and looked at her. This is it, I said quietly. The truth. The whole truth. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She knew. We both knew. The storm outside had finally stopped, and in the silence that followed, I made a decision. I couldn't change the past, but I could change what came next. And maybe, just maybe, I could find peace with it all. I stood there, the weight of the journal heavy in my hands, the letters from my father still echoing in my mind. His regrets, his pain, his admission of failure. It was all there, laid out in front of me. For so many years, I had avoided the past, trying to outrun it, but it was never far behind. Now, with every word I read, it was becoming clear. The ghosts of my past weren't just memories, they were pieces of a puzzle I had to solve. The girl, still standing in the doorway, watched me silently. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't fully understand, not yet, but she was waiting for me to make sense of it. I could feel the storm brewing inside me, the anger and confusion, the guilt and the regret. But I couldn't let it consume me. I had to finish this. I had to understand. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and turned back to the chest. There was something more in there, something I hadn't yet found. I could feel it, that nagging sensation that I was on the verge of uncovering something that would change everything. I opened the chest again, pulling out more letters, more documents, each one more disturbing than the last. The pages were filled with my father's handwriting, each one revealing another layer of his life, his involvement with people I never knew, the choices he made that led to the man he became. But there was one letter that stood out. It was addressed to me, and the handwriting was different. It was familiar, but not my father's. I hesitated for a moment before I opened it. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. The ink was smudged, the paper creased from years of being folded and hidden away. If you're reading this, then, you found what you weren't supposed to. The letter began. You're probably wondering why this was kept from you, why you were never told the truth. The truth is, your father was never the man you thought he was. He was part of something much bigger, something darker than you can imagine. And the only reason you don't know everything is because he tried to protect you. The words burned into my mind, each one sinking deeper into my soul. My father had been hiding something. Something big. Something that, if I knew, could change everything. The letter continued, detailing things I couldn't even begin to understand. My father had been involved in something illegal, something dangerous, and I had been kept in the dark. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part was that the letter implied I had been part of it all along. I wasn't just a bystander. I wasn't just a kid who didn't know any better. The letter suggested that I had been a part of my father's world, a world of violence and crime, even before I knew what that meant. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I read on. The truth will come out eventually, the letter said. You can't keep running from it forever. It's in your blood. It's in your name. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My heart was racing, and I could feel the walls closing in around me. What was this? What had my father done? And why had he never told me? I had always thought I was different from him, that I had somehow escaped the darkness that he had been a part of. But now I wasn't so sure. I could feel the anger rising in my chest, the betrayal, the confusion. The girl stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the storm in my mind. Who was he really? She asked, her eyes wide with innocence, yet full of understanding. I didn't know how to answer her. The man I had always thought I knew, the man I had looked up to, was nothing more than a stranger. A man with secrets, with lies, with a past that was far darker than I could have ever imagined. He wasn't the man I thought he was, I finally said, my voice hoarse. And now I have to figure out what that means. For me. For everyone. The girl nodded, her expression serious, though she didn't fully understand the gravity of what I was saying. She was just a child after all. But somehow, she was a part of this now, a part of the story I had to unravel. I looked at her, my eyes filled with determination. We're not done yet, I said. There's more. I need to find out what it all means. I need to find the truth. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, watching me, as if she understood the weight of the moment, the gravity of what we were about to uncover. I knew I couldn't do this alone. The past had already caught up with me, and now, I had to face it. There was no more running, no more hiding. The truth was waiting, and I was going to find it, no matter what it cost. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity, the weight of its words sinking deeper into my mind. I couldn't process it all at once. Every sentence, every phrase, felt like it was unraveling everything I thought I knew about my life. My father's hidden life, the choices he made, the life I had inherited, none of it was as it seemed. The girl, still standing in the doorway, was watching me, sensing the shift in the air. She didn't know what the letter meant, but I could tell she felt the tension. I took a shaky breath, trying to regain my composure. There's more to this, I said, my voice rough. There's something I haven't told you. She tilted her head, her innocent curiosity shining through. What do you mean? She asked, stepping closer. I swallowed hard. My father wasn't just involved in things I didn't understand. He made choices that affected more than just us. The girl looked at me with a mix of confusion and concern, as if she were trying to grasp what I was saying, but couldn't quite connect the dots. I walked past her, my mind still racing as I tried to piece together the fragments of the past. I knew I had to face it all, but I didn't know how. Every corner of this house, every room, felt like it held another piece of the puzzle. The chest, the letters, the photograph, and, now, this journal. These were the clues that would lead me to the truth, but where did they take me? What was the next step? I walked over to the window and looked out at the darkening sky, the storm still raging outside. The rain was relentless, and the wind howled through the trees, just as my thoughts howled through my mind. I had thought I was done with all this, that I could escape the past and start fresh. But now it was clear, there was no running from it. My father's choices were still haunting me. The girl's voice broke through my thoughts. What's next? She asked, her voice soft but steady. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide, filled with something between worry and curiosity, but she wasn't afraid. She wasn't running from the truth like I had. She was standing here with me, ready to face whatever came next. It was strange, how a child could show such courage in the face of something so heavy. We need to find out everything, I said, my voice firm. Everything my father hid from me, everything he was a part of. I can't live with these questions anymore. The girl nodded, her expression serious, though I knew she didn't fully understand the weight of what we were about to do. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that she was with me, and together, we would uncover whatever secrets my father had left behind. I turned back to the desk, the chest still sitting there, its contents spilling out onto the floor. The more I dug through it, the more questions piled up. I pulled out another letter, this one dated years ago. My father's handwriting was on the page, his words raw and unfiltered. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't protect anyone. I thought I could leave, but now I see it's too late. The damage is done. You're all better off without me. The letter was filled with more guilt, more sorrow, but it didn't make sense. Who was he talking about? Who had he failed? I slammed the letter down on the table in frustration. The girl, standing by the door, looked at me with concern. What does it mean? She asked. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady my breathing. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. The silence in the room was heavy now, thick with the weight of the past pressing down on me. I turned back to the chest, pulling out more papers. But it was one final letter that caught my eye. This one was different. It was addressed to me, written just before my father disappeared. The handwriting was shaky, frantic, as though he had written it in a rush, desperate to say something. I don't have much time, the letter began. There's something you need to know, something that will change everything. You're not who you think you are. Your mother and I, we made choices, dangerous choices. Choices that put you in the crosshairs of people who never should have been involved in our lives. I froze. The words were like a punch to the gut. Who was my father protecting me from? What had he done that was so dangerous? I'm sorry, the letter continued. I should have told you sooner, but I was trying to protect you. If you find this, you'll know the truth. And you'll know why I had to leave. My hand trembled as I finished reading the letter. There was a deep, gut-wrenching silence in the room. I didn't know what to think or what to do next. But one thing was certain. My father had been hiding something far worse than I had ever imagined. And it was time to find out what it was. The girl was still standing there, watching me. What now? She asked, her voice small but resolute. I looked at her, my heart pounding. Now, I said slowly, we go deeper. We find out what he was hiding. And we don't stop until we know the truth. I stood there, staring at the letter in disbelief, my heart racing with a mix of confusion, anger, and fear. The words on the page were like a cold slap to my face. My father's secrets were darker than I could have ever imagined. I had always thought he was just a man with a troubled past, someone who had made mistakes but ultimately wanted to protect me. But now, as the truth began to unfold, it became clear that the man I had idolized was far from the hero I had always imagined. My fingers trembled as I set the letter down. The girl, still standing quietly beside me, was waiting for me to speak, her eyes wide with concern. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could feel the weight of it, the gravity of the moment. She had been a part of this from the start, unknowingly opening the door to a past that had been buried for too long. Who was he really? She asked softly, her voice cutting through the silence. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I wanted to tell her the truth, to explain everything, but I didn't even know where to begin. The man I had known as my father had kept so much from me, so much that I was still piecing together. He was someone I thought I could trust. I finally said, my voice cracking slightly. But he was hiding things. Things that could have destroyed us both if they ever came to light. The girl nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. She didn't say anything, but I could see that she was trying to process everything, just as I was. I turned away, walking over to the window, looking out at the rain as it continued to pour. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil inside me, the chaos that was building as the past came rushing back, threatening to consume everything. I needed to make sense of it all, but the more I uncovered, the more questions I had. The truth was slipping through my fingers, and I was struggling to keep up. I needed answers. I needed to know what my father had done, what he had been involved in, and most importantly, why he had kept it from me for so long. I reached for the chest again, pulling out more documents, more photographs, each one leading me further down a dark path. But as I dug deeper, the weight of the past grew heavier, suffocating me. My father's actions, his choices, they were all tied to something bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. I had thought I was safe, that my life was my own. But the more I learned, the more I realized that I had been living in the shadow of a man whose sins ran deep. I don't know if I can keep going with this, I muttered to myself, my hands shaking as I sorted through the papers. The girl, sensing my frustration, came over and stood beside me. You don't have to do it alone, she said quietly, her voice full of determination. I'm here. I looked at her, surprised by her words. She was just a kid, but there was something about her, something in the way she looked at me, that made me believe her. She wasn't scared. She wasn't running from the truth. She was standing here with me, ready to face whatever came next. Thanks, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to explain this. It's not just about me anymore. It's about what my father did, what he kept hidden, and how it affects everything. The girl nodded, her expression serious. We'll figure it out together, she said. Her words gave me a small sense of hope, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. I had spent so many years pushing people away, refusing to let anyone close, but here she was, offering me a hand when I needed it most. I couldn't do this alone, and for the first time, I didn't have to. I turned back to the chest, pulling out one last item. It was a small envelope, sealed with wax, and it had my name on it. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, not sure what to expect. Inside, there was another letter, but this one was different. It wasn't written by my father. It was written by someone else, someone I didn't recognize. The words were carefully chosen, the handwriting neat and precise. If you're reading this, then you've uncovered the truth. Your father wasn't just involved in criminal activities. He was a part of something much bigger. A network, a group that's still out there. And they will come for you. The letter went on to explain more details about the people my father had worked with, the deals he had made, and the dangerous world he had been a part of. But the most chilling part of the letter was the final sentence. You are in danger now. They know you are looking for answers, and they will stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. My blood ran cold as I read the words, my hands trembling. The girl stood beside me, her eyes scanning the letter, her face pale as she understood the gravity of what we were facing. This wasn't just a matter of uncovering family secrets anymore. This was about survival. And if we didn't figure out the truth, we would be the ones paying the price. The letter was clear. Whoever my father had been involved with, they were watching me now. And they wouldn't stop until I was silenced. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the storm in my chest was louder than ever. The truth had brought me to this point, but it was also the very thing that might destroy me. I stared at the letter, my heart pounding in my chest. The words had barely sunk in, but already, I could feel the danger closing in on me. They were watching, the people my father had been involved with, the ones he had kept hidden from me. My pulse quickened as the weight of the letter settled over me like a thick fog. The girl was standing beside me, her face pale, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I could see that she understood the gravity of the situation, but there was still so much we didn't know. Who were they? What did they want with me? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. The truth, once buried so deep, had come rushing to the surface, and with it came a wave of fear and uncertainty. I had spent so long thinking I was free from my father's past, but now it was clear, there was no escaping it. I turned the letter over, hoping to find more information, but there was nothing else. No contact information, no clues, just more warnings. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. They were here. I grabbed the letter and stuffed it back into the envelope, my hands trembling. The girl looked at me, her expression confused but alert. What's happening? She asked, her voice small but steady. We need to go, I said, my voice firm despite the panic rising in my chest. Now. I didn't know who was out there, but I could feel the tension in the air. They were coming for me. For us. I turned toward the back of the house, moving quickly, pulling the girl with me. We didn't have time to waste. I could hear the footsteps getting closer, a steady rhythm that was unmistakable. They were already inside the house. The girl's grip tightened on my hand, but she didn't say anything. She trusted me. I could feel it, even in the chaos. I reached the back door, my heart racing, and flung it open. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. We had to move, and we had to move fast. I looked around, scanning the yard for any sign of movement. The rain was still falling in sheets, the wind howling through the trees, but it was eerily quiet otherwise. Too quiet. I pulled the girl close, crouching low as we made our way toward the edge of the property. I had no plan. I had no idea what to do next. All I knew was that we couldn't stay here. Not anymore. The house wasn't safe. The past had caught up with me, and now it was chasing me down. I could hear voices in the distance, low and muffled, but getting closer. They were searching for us. I knew it. My mind raced as I looked around for somewhere to hide. There was a shed near the back fence, a small structure that was barely standing. It would have to do. I pulled the girl toward it, my breath coming faster now. We had to make it there. It was the only chance we had. We reached the shed, and I quickly pulled open the creaky door, pushing us both inside. The darkness inside felt suffocating, but I didn't care. I slammed the door shut behind us, pressing my back against it as if it would somehow keep them out. The girl was standing next to me, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't say anything. She was too scared to speak, too scared to move. I could feel her fear, but I couldn't let it stop me. I had to be strong. I had to protect her. Stay quiet, I whispered, my voice low but urgent. She nodded, pressing herself into the corner of the shed. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, trying to think. I needed to figure out what to do next. How to escape. How to survive. The sound of footsteps was growing louder, the voices now clearer. They were close. Too close. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my heart pounding in my ears. They were getting closer. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to make a decision. I turned to the girl, my eyes meeting hers. Listen to me, I said, my voice steady despite the panic bubbling inside me. We're going to leave this shed when it's safe. I'll get us out of here. I promise. She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She didn't know if she could trust me, not completely. How could she? We were in this together, but I was still a stranger to her, someone she had met only a few days ago. I clenched my fists, trying to push back the fear. I couldn't let it control me. I couldn't let it control us. I listened carefully, trying to gauge how close they were. The voices were still muffled, but I could tell they were moving around the house, searching. They hadn't found the shed yet, but it wouldn't be long before they did. I had to move, had to think of something. Then it hit me, my motorcycle. It was parked just outside, hidden behind the trees near the back of the yard. If I could get to it, we could escape. We could make it out of here. But it was a long shot. It was risky. If they saw us, we'd never make it. But it was the only chance we had. I turned to the girl. Stay here, I said, my voice firm. Don't move. I'll be back for you. She looked at me, fear and uncertainty in her eyes, but she nodded. I took a deep breath and slowly opened the door of the shed, peering out into the darkness. The rain was falling harder now, making it harder to see, but that might work to our advantage. I stepped out into the wet yard, moving as quietly as I could, my eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. The footsteps were still distant, but I knew they wouldn't stay that way for long. I had to make it to the motorcycle. I had to get out of here. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stepped carefully away from the shed, my eyes scanning the yard. Every step I took was slow and deliberate, each movement calculated to avoid detection. The rain had turned into a steady downpour, the kind that made everything feel distant and muffled. I could barely see through the sheets of water falling around me, but I knew I had to move quickly. The motorcycle was my only chance. It was the one thing I knew could get us out of here, away from the danger that was closing in on us. I glanced back toward the shed. The girl was still inside, waiting for me to return. She had no idea what I was planning, but I wasn't about to let her down. I had to get to that motorcycle. As I neared the trees at the edge of the yard, I could see the faint outline of my bike parked behind them, hidden from view. The engine had always been my escape, my one way to outrun everything else. But now, it wasn't just an escape, it was our lifeline. I moved faster now, my boots sinking slightly into the wet ground as I reached the motorcycle. The familiar rumble of the engine was just a few moments away, and with it, freedom. I grabbed the handlebars, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingers, and quickly checked the bike. It looked untouched, which was a small blessing in the chaos. I could hear voices in the distance now, closer than before. They were moving through the house, and I knew they were getting closer. Time was running out. I swung my leg over the bike and kicked the engine to life. The deep roar of the engine echoed through the yard, cutting through the sound of the rain. I winced, knowing the noise would draw attention. It was too late to worry about that now. I revved the engine once, twice, and then shot off, cutting through the wet grass toward the back gate. I could feel the bike beneath me, the power of it propelling me forward, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. I had to be fast. I had to get us out of here. The rain was pouring down harder now, the wind making it harder to see. The road ahead was blurry, and I could feel the weight of the past chasing me, chasing us. I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The house disappeared behind me as I sped down the dirt road, the familiar feeling of freedom taking over. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was nothing following us. Not yet. I had a brief moment of hope, but it didn't last. I knew the people after me were resourceful. They wouldn't give up so easily. The road stretched ahead, winding through trees and hills, but there was no clear destination, no clear place to run. I had no plan, no safe place to go. The weight of the letter in my pocket, the one that warned me of the people my father had been involved with, weighed on me. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. A promise that the past would catch up with me. The girl's face flashed in my mind. She had trusted me to protect her, but how could I protect her when I was running from the truth myself? I couldn't let them catch us. I couldn't let her get hurt. I kept pushing the throttle, forcing the bike to go faster, as if outrunning the past was still possible. The rain blurred everything around me, but I kept my focus ahead. It felt like I was racing against the storm itself, trying to outrun the darkness that was closing in. And then, just as I turned a corner, I saw the lights. They were bright, cutting through the rain like searchlights. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what it was. They were already here. They had found us. I slammed the throttle down, pushing the bike harder, my heart in my throat. The headlights in the distance grew brighter, and I could hear the sound of more engines, more vehicles. The pursuit had begun. I could feel my pulse racing as I swerved around the corner, desperately trying to lose them. But the road ahead was narrow, and the rain was making it treacherous. I had to get us out of here. I had to find a way to escape, but I had no idea where to go. The sound of the engines behind me was growing louder, and I knew they were closing in. I couldn't outrun them forever. My mind raced as I looked for a way out, a way to lose them. Then I saw it, a small trail off the road, barely visible through the trees, but it was there. I didn't hesitate. I turned sharply, the bike fishtailing slightly on the wet ground as I took the trail. The rain made it harder to see, but I trusted my instincts. The bike bounced over rocks and roots, the trees on either side making the path even more difficult to navigate. But this was my chance. If I could just make it far enough into the woods, I might be able to lose them. I glanced back for a split second, my heart sinking as I saw the lights of their vehicles turn onto the trail behind me. They were relentless. But so was I. I couldn't give up now. The sound of the engines grew louder, and I pushed the bike even harder, feeling the power beneath me as we sped through the trees. I could hear the branches scraping against the sides of the bike, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. The rain was relentless, the mud making every turn more dangerous, but I had no choice. I had to keep going. I had to keep running. I could feel the rain pelting down harder, the wind howling through the trees as I swerved through the narrow trail, trying to outrun the pursuit behind me. The engine of my motorcycle roared beneath me, but no matter how fast I pushed the throttle, the headlights in my rearview mirror were growing closer, the sound of their engines almost deafening. I glanced over my shoulder for a split second, just enough to see that they were gaining on us. I slammed the throttle harder, my heart racing in my chest as I wove in and out of the trees, trying to shake them off. The trail was rough, muddy, and slippery, but there was no turning back now. Every turn I made felt like it could be my last, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The girl, clinging to the back of the bike, was silent, her small arms wrapped tightly around me. Her body pressed close, as if she could somehow feel the danger closing in. She was scared. I could see it in the way she gripped me, but she trusted me. That trust gave me the strength I needed to push on. We had to get away. The motorcycle bounced over rocks, the tires slipping, but I kept steady, trying to maintain control. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and the world around me was a blur of water, mud, and trees. It felt like I was driving blind, the vision from my helmet fogging up with every second that passed. But I couldn't slow down. I couldn't afford to. I pushed the bike faster, desperate to get away, to lose them, but they were still behind us, right on our tail. I heard the sound of their engines growing louder, the weight of their pursuit pressing down on me like a vice. I had to find a way to lose them. As I rounded another bend in the trail, I saw it, a steep drop on the left side of the path. It was risky, but it was the only chance we had. I made the split-second decision to take the chance, veering the motorcycle off the path and down the hill. The bike lurched, and I had to fight to keep it steady as we went down, the trees whipping by in a blur. The drop was steep, and I could feel the adrenaline surge through me as we sped downhill. My mind raced. Would the bike make it? Would we survive the descent? I focused on the path ahead, trying to keep the bike from tipping over as the tires gripped the muddy ground. The girl gasped, her hands tightening around my waist, but she didn't scream. She trusted me. We were moving faster now, and the sound of the other vehicles grew more distant. I glanced back once more, only to see the lights fading into the distance. Had we lost them? The relief was short-lived, as I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. I had to keep moving. I had to get us to safety. We reached the bottom of the hill, and I quickly steered the bike toward a narrow path through the trees. It was the kind of path that was barely noticeable, one that could easily be missed if you didn't know where to look. I slowed down slightly, trying to catch my breath, my hands still gripping the handlebars tightly. The rain had lessened, but the ground was still slick, and I had to be careful. We couldn't afford any mistakes. The path wound through the dense forest, the trees looming overhead, blocking out the last remnants of daylight. I could barely see the way forward, but I knew I had to keep going. We couldn't stop. The pursuit could be right behind us, and I couldn't afford to give them the chance to catch up. I leaned into the bike, taking each turn carefully, keeping the speed steady as I navigated through the narrow, twisting trail. The girl was still holding on tightly, her body pressed against mine as if she could feel the tension in the air. I could hear her breathing, soft and steady, and I knew she was trying to stay calm. She had to be scared, but she didn't let it show. I admired her strength. I just hoped we could make it through this. As we rode deeper into the forest, the sounds of the world around us seemed to fade away. The trees closed in, the path grew narrower, and the only sound I could hear was the roar of the motorcycle engine. The lights from the pursuers were completely gone now, but I knew that didn't mean we were safe. I had to keep my guard up. The sun had completely set by the time we reached the edge of the forest, and the road ahead was completely dark. I slowed the bike to a stop, my mind racing. We had to figure out where to go from here. I looked around, trying to get a sense of where we were. The forest had thinned out, and there was a small clearing up ahead, but it was still too quiet, too still. My instincts told me to keep moving, but the exhaustion was starting to hit me. I could feel my body aching, my hands cramping from holding onto the bike for so long. We had been riding for what felt like hours, but I couldn't rest yet. Not until we were safe. I turned to the girl, who was still clinging to me, her eyes wide and alert. "We need to keep moving," I said quietly, my voice hoarse. "Stay close. We can't afford to stop." She nodded, and we continued forward, the darkness pressing in around us. Every step I took felt like a step into the unknown. We had no destination, no plan, just the hope that we could outrun the past, outrun the people who were coming for us. The rain had stopped, but the cold still bit at my skin. The night was silent except for the crunching of leaves under the tires. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for the moment we would slip up. But I couldn't stop. Not now. I wouldn't let the past catch up with us. I kept riding, my focus sharp as the trees blurred past us, the road ahead dim and uncertain. The bike roared beneath me, but I could feel the weight of the night closing in. The darkness felt heavier now, the weight of everything we had uncovered pressing down on me. The girl was still holding on tight, her small body pressed against mine, her breath steady in the cool night air. I could feel her fear, but she trusted me, and that was something I couldn't let go of. I glanced back, my eyes scanning the road behind us. We had lost them, at least for now, but I knew they wouldn't stop. I knew they would keep coming for us until they had what they wanted. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how far you ran. I gritted my teeth, pushing the throttle harder, urging the bike faster down the winding trail. My mind raced with the thoughts of the people my father had been involved with, the things I had yet to understand. What was his connection to them? What had they wanted from him, from me? I had no answers, only questions that seemed to multiply the longer I stayed in the dark. The further we went, the more I realized that there was no running away from this. I couldn't leave the past behind. It had already found me. The headlights of another vehicle appeared in the distance, cutting through the night like a beacon. They were back. I cursed under my breath. How had they caught up so quickly? I didn't have much time to think. I needed to lose them again, and this time for good. I saw a fork in the road ahead, the path splitting into two. I had no idea where either of them led, but I couldn't afford to second-guess myself now. I swerved to the left, the tires skidding slightly as I pushed the bike through the turn. The path ahead was even narrower, the trees pressing in closer on either side. I had to keep my focus sharp. One wrong move, and we'd be caught. I could hear the other vehicle now, their engine revving. In pursuit. They were closing in again, but I wouldn't let them catch us. I had to get us to safety. I gritted my teeth, pushing the bike harder, trying to outpace them. The road ahead was steep, and the rain made every turn more dangerous. But I couldn't afford to slow down. Not now. I glanced at the girl behind me. Her face was set in determination, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I had promised to protect her, and that was a promise I would keep, no matter what it took. The sound of the other vehicle's engine grew louder, and I could feel the pressure building. The rain was coming down even harder now, the wind whipping through the trees. The road was slick, and I could feel the tires slipping beneath me. The trail ahead seemed to narrow further, the trees closing in. I had to make a choice, stay on the road and risk being trapped, or take the path that looked like it could lead to nowhere. I made my decision in an instant. I veered off the road, taking a sharp turn into the trees. The bike bounced over rocks and branches, the trail rough and unpredictable. But it was the only chance we had. I could hear the vehicle behind us crashing through the brush, but they were still too far behind to catch us. For now, we were safe. The trees thinned out, and ahead of us, I saw a clearing. I slowed the bike, the headlights illuminating the path ahead. We were far from the road now, deep into the forest, but the clearing seemed like a good place to stop, to catch our breath. I pulled the bike to a stop, the engine still rumbling beneath me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. The girl slid off the back of the bike, her legs unsteady, but she stood firm. I looked around, trying to get a sense of where we were. The clearing was surrounded by trees on all sides, and there was no sign of the road or any other trail leading out. We were isolated, and that made me feel uneasy. I wasn't sure how long we could stay here without being found. I glanced at the girl. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice steady but urgent. "This place won't keep us safe for long." She nodded, though I could tell she was exhausted, just as I was. We had been on the run for so long, and I didn't know how much longer we could keep this up. But we didn't have a choice. The past was still chasing us, and we had to stay ahead of it. I could hear the sound of a branch snapping in the distance, followed by the unmistakable hum of an engine. They were getting closer. "We have to move now," I said, my voice sharper this time. I climbed back onto the bike, motioning for her to do the same. She hesitated for a moment, but then climbed onto the back, wrapping her arms around me again. We couldn't stay here, not when they were so close. I kicked the bike to life, the engine roaring as we sped off into the night, deeper into the unknown. We had no plan, no safe place to go, but we had each other. And for now, that had to be enough. The past was still out there, waiting to catch up with us, but we weren't going to stop. We were going to keep running. And maybe, just maybe, we'd make it out alive.